Today we have a crazy story of revenge against an awful stepbrother. We'll get into what went down in a bit, but first, try to freeload off me? You all will get what you deserve. I used to have these friends I lived with that made my life a living heck. Well, not in the way it might be when someone cheats on another, but I'd rather have preferred to have lived alone and never ever met them. One of the very first things that often got me upset was the fact that there was always the usual jungle of dirty dishes and overflowing laundry baskets. I lived with them for 2 years. 2 whole years I'd spent living in a constant state of low-grade resentment, courtesy of my friends. They were David and Tina, the picture-perfect couple with steady jobs who had a knack for forgetting their share of the bills. Brittany, the makeup artist with a rainbow of palettes littering her vanity, always swore her student loans devoured her entire paycheck, and AJ, the self-proclaimed entrepreneur, bounced from one get-rich-quick scheme to another, leaving a trail of unpaid rent in his wake. There was a debate on how we should pay the bills, but we all decided to give the money to the person whose name was on the bill. David paid the mortgage. Tina paid the water and electric and gas, and I paid the internet. It came to the point where I was paying close to 80% of the mortgage by myself, the entire water bill, about 75% of the gas and electric, and I was paying for the internet bill by myself. It was always me, Alex, the lonely underpaid night nurse left picking up the slack and footing the bills. There were always sleepless nights since I had double shifts and still worked another job. I was practically slaving away being the dutiful housemate. Every penny I dipped into my savings account to keep the water running felt like a betrayal, a sacrifice for people who saw me as a human piggy bank, not a friend. The worst part? The realization that I'd poured my heart into creating a home, only to have them make it a place to dread to return to. The final straw came when I unearthed a treasure trove of overdue notices buried under a greasy mountain of takeout menus. Foreclosure loomed, a chilling reminder of their reckless spending, while they continued to treat our shared space like a 5-star hotel. Anger, hot and potent, bubbled up within me, laced with a desperate need to escape. It was time for a fresh start. The news of my promotion came with bittersweet relief. Earning almost double my current salary meant a fresh start, a chance to finally escape the financial burden I'd been carrying for far too long in that shared house. But before celebrating, I had a score to settle. My so-called friends, David, Tina, Brittany, and AJ, had taken advantage of my good nature for far too long. I didn't leave in one piece though, as there were attempts from them to make me pay bills with them, even though I'd made it already known that I would be leaving in a few weeks. So as I unpacked and my phone buzzed persistently, a flicker of apprehension danced across my stomach. Was it Dave blowing up my phone with some sob story about the bills he could never manage on his own? Or maybe Brittany, begging for another loan to fuel her online shopping sprees? It turned out to be Todd, my ex-landlord's retired cop neighbor. He'd always been a calming presence amidst the chaos. A smile tugged at my lips as I typed out a casual, "Hey, how's it going?" The reply arrived in seconds, laced with Todd's gruff charm. "Looks like your old mates are dealing with some karma. Heard David's fancy car got towed last week, and Tina's been whining about the heat non-stop. Serves them right." I will admit there was a sense of glee over me. It was undeniably satisfying to see them struggling, a tiny voice whispering, "They had it coming." However, a stronger emotion bubbled up, a strange disquiet. Did I really want them to suffer? No, revenge wasn't the goal, but the thought of them breezing through life after everything was infuriating. The solution arrived not in some elaborate scheme, but through a blossoming friendship with Todd. Daily texts morphed into regular calls filled with updates on my new life and seemingly offhand questions about my former housemates. Todd proved to be a goldmine of information. He confirmed David's car woes and the ominous eviction notices on the front door. He even revealed that Tina was slinging hash at a greasy spoon diner, a far cry from her previous carefree existence. The pieces started falling into place. The bigger challenge was AJ. Todd had no clue about his work situation, but a memory surfaced. AJ bragging about an upcoming management position at a prestigious tech firm. A quick online search confirmed my suspicions. No record of AJ existed at this supposed company. Armed with this knowledge, I had to craft a plan. Not one that would sabotage his chances of real employment, but one that exposed his web of lies. It wouldn't be a fiery explosion of revenge, but a series of carefully placed nudges. Hopefully, these nudges would force them to confront their financial irresponsibility and, in the end, become better versions of themselves. I wasn't aiming for their downfall, just a healthy dose of karma with a side of self-reliance. The plan was set and fueled by a newfound sense of purpose. I was ready to get things rolling. David's biggest weakness, I knew, was his pride. He carefully cultivated an image of the responsible family man, despite his constant neglect of his child support obligations. A flyer from work about the local child support agency sparked an idea. Anonymously, I submitted an online report. I included David's current address and a brief description of his unpredictable work hours that always seemed to clash with bill due dates. The report also mentioned, with a touch of feigned sadness, the potential impact this might have on his child's well-being. The wait was torture. Days bled into weeks and doubt gnawed at the edges of my plan. Had it been too much? Too little? Then one glorious, sun-drenched afternoon, Todd called with a juicy tidbit. "Looks like David's been making frequent trips to the courthouse lately," he chuckled. Apparently, a child support summons had landed squarely in David's lap, and his unpredictable work schedule was causing friction with his current job. A pang of sympathy lanced through me, but it was quickly eclipsed by a sense of justice served. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the wake-up call he needed to prioritize his child's well-being. Brittany always dreamed of working as a makeup artist for the fancy brand Glimmer and Gloss. She wouldn't stop talking about their internship program. Since I knew she liked to exaggerate how much experience she had and how much money she had, I decided to give her a little push. I used a voice changer and a fake email address to send a message to Glimmer and Gloss, pretending to be her old coworker. The message carefully hinted that Brittany wasn't good with money, like how she was late on rent and her loans were past due. It even mentioned her creative ways of making a budget work, which might not have been exactly honest. I didn't lie, but I made them question if she was the right fit for their program. Glimmer and Gloss likes people who are honest with money, so this email might stop Brittany from getting her dream job. But here's the thing. I also hoped it would make her realize she needs to fix her finances and build a strong foundation for her career. After all, I wasn't trying to destroy her chances, just make her get on the right track. AJ loved pretending to be a successful businessman online. He was all about the hustle, and his social media was filled with posts about fake business deals. This was my chance to take action. I used a fake photo and a fake name to create an online persona named Brian the Investor. I sent AJ messages that made him brag about fake investments and big business deals. Then, I anonymously leaked these conversations to a local online forum where everyone AJ knew and potential employers hung out. Everyone on the forum started laughing at AJ's lies. They made fun of his claims about changing the world with his businesses. This might be embarrassing for AJ, but that wasn't the goal. I wanted him to realize he was lying and needed to focus on getting real skills instead of bragging about nothing. Maybe this would make him want to learn and stop pretending. Things started falling apart for them slowly, like a woven fabric coming undone. I stayed away and learned about their lives from Todd and their social media, which they carefully controlled. Their perfect lives online started to crack. David might lose his job soon, they might get kicked out of their house again because of not paying rent. Brittany stopped posting happy things online and started hinting at a new beginning. AJ disappeared from everywhere online and nobody could find him anymore. Then one day the phone rang, shattering the silence I'd come to love in my new apartment. It was David, his voice laced with desperation. Eviction loomed and he was begging for a loan to cover back rent. My hand hovered over the accept button, then I steeled myself. "David," I said, my voice firm but fair, "this isn't sustainable. You need to learn how to budget and prioritize your child's well-being. Maybe this is the wake-up call you need to get your finances in order." There was a stunned silence on the other end before the call ended. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something real in David, a dawning understanding of the mess he'd created. The final blow for my ex-housemates came crashing down with a text from Todd. A picture, a legal notice plastered on the familiar front door. The landlord was suing them for unpaid utilities and damages. Guilt gnawed at me. Had I gone too far? Pushed them over the edge? But then, memory surfaced. I remembered the night I returned from a double shift, exhausted and famished. The fridge, usually overflowing thanks to Tina's stocking up sprees, gaped empty. That was the one thing I could still give them credit for. Yes, the place was always a mess. I picked up almost all the bills, but there was always food in the fridge. So naturally, I went to complain as they were all together in what seemed like a movie marathon that had been going on for hours. I said how it was unfair that there was no food and I wasn't informed to pick up something to eat on my way home, only to have Tina throw my words that it wasn't like I had any hold on the food stuff in the fridge anyway, as she had to buy most of it. I was just stunned seeing as I was pulling far more than she was, and I was the reason they had electricity to watch the movies they murmured I was distracting them from. So no, I could not feel any pity at all. I also remembered one time the city had offered free financial planning workshops. I had suggested we all attend, but the idea was met with scoffs and eye rolls. A wry smile touched my lips. Perhaps I'd send them a message that karma plays a long game. Anonymously, I called the landlord, casually mentioning the flyer and suggesting it as a resource for the current tenants. I hadn't orchestrated their downfall, but I had shown them a path towards taking ownership of their choices. The house would likely be sold, its residents scattered like leaves on a windy day, but amidst the chaos, maybe, just maybe, there were seeds of positive change taking root. As for me, with my peaceful New Haven and a flourishing career, I was ready to move forward. The drama of Maple Street was a closed chapter, and a brighter future awaited. I was gonna say this was like the much less bloody, non-killing roommate version of like Kill Bill. OP had their list of people they had to get back and they just knocked them off one by one. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is, if you try to bully me, I'll make it hard for you to find a new job. Balancing work and college without any parental support was tough enough. I didn't need anyone making it tougher, but as the story will turn out, that was exactly what Emma had in mind for me. My name is Daniel, and I'd been working at the small coffee shop in our town for a little over 3 years. My parents didn't help me financially, so this job was my lifeline. I relied on every paycheck to cover my tuition and rent. The pressure to keep up with my studies and work enough hours was overwhelming, but I was determined to graduate and build a better future for myself. The coffee shop is a cozy spot in town where everyone loves to hang out. It's always bustling with regular customers and new faces, creating a vibrant atmosphere. The place had become a second home to me and my fellow employees, most of whom were also college students. We formed a tight-knit team, supporting each other through the daily grind. Despite the busy environment, there was a sense of closeness that made the long hours more bearable. Our customers appreciated our friendly service, making it feel like a true community hub. Our manager, Emma, initially seemed professional and competent. At first glance, she appeared to run the coffee shop smoothly. However, it didn't take long to notice her manipulative side. She had a habit of nitpicking and stirring up trouble among the staff. Though she acted friendly in front of customers, behind the scenes, her true nature emerged. Emma's sly comments and power plays created a toxic atmosphere, making many of us anxious about her next move. Her behavior hinted at deeper issues that we'd soon discover. Jake joined our team for just a few months before he had to quit. He was a kind-hearted guy, always wearing a smile and eager to help. From the moment he started, he showed a genuine interest in fitting in and getting to know everyone. Jake's positive energy was infectious, and he quickly became a favorite among both the staff and customers. I remember our first conversation during a slow afternoon shift. We bonded over shared college struggles and dreams for the future. His enthusiasm was a breath of fresh air, and I appreciated having someone so positive around. We worked well together, and it seemed like Jake was settling in nicely. It didn't take long for Emma to set her sights on Jake. She seemed to relish finding new targets, and Jake's cheerful demeanor must have made him an appealing one. It started with small things like giving him the worst shifts or criticizing his work over minor mistakes. Then the rumors began. Emma whispered to customers and other employees that Jake was unreliable and lazy, even though he was one of the hardest workers. The public humiliation was the worst. One busy morning in front of a line of customers, she loudly accused Jake of messing up an order, even though it was her mistake. Jake's face turned red, and I could see the light in his eyes start to dim. Despite Emma's attacks, Jake tried to stay positive. He confided in me about his struggles, and I did my best to support him. I assured him that Emma's behavior was a reflection of her own issues, not his abilities. We brainstormed ways to improve his situation, but it seemed like Emma was always one step ahead, finding new ways to break him down. Watching Jake's morale decline was heartbreaking, and I felt helpless, unable to stop the unfair treatment. The breaking point came on a busy Saturday. Emma accused Jake of stealing tips, a serious and false allegation. She did this in front of the entire staff and several regular customers, ensuring maximum humiliation. Jake was devastated. He tried to defend himself, but Emma's mind was made up and she wouldn't listen. That night, Jake handed in his resignation. He couldn't take the constant bullying anymore. His departure left a void in the coffee shop. The atmosphere, already tense, grew even more oppressive. The remaining employees were demoralized, and I was filled with a mix of anger and sadness. Jake had been a bright spot in our daily grind, and now he was gone because of Emma's malicious behavior. It made me more determined to stand up to her, but I knew I had to be smart about it. The emotional toll of Jake's resignation was heavy, but it also strengthened my resolve to find a way to fight back against Emma's tyranny. After Jake left, guess who Emma's attention shifted to? Yeah, you guessed right, me. It felt like I had a target on my back. She started accusing me of stealing tips, the same way she had with Jake. She spread rumors that I was lazy and incompetent, which was far from the truth. Emma's constant nitpicking made every shift a nightmare. She would criticize everything I did, no matter how well I performed. One particularly bad day, Emma purposely didn't warn me that a coffee pot was boiling hot. As I reached for it, I burned my hand severely. Emma just smirked and said, "Be more careful next time, Daniel." The physical pain was intense, but the emotional toll was even worse. I felt isolated and paranoid, constantly watching my back. My work performance started to suffer, which only gave Emma more ammunition to use against me. Her hostility was relentless, and I was quickly approaching my breaking point. Emma's harassment took a serious toll on my mental health and academics. I found it hard to concentrate in class, and my grades started slipping. I was constantly anxious, dreading my shifts at the coffee shop. The stress was overwhelming, and I barely slept at night, replaying Emma's cruel words and actions in my mind. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I sat in my tiny apartment surrounded by textbooks and unpaid bills. Tears streamed down my face as I considered the possibility of dropping out of college. I felt trapped in a cycle of despair, unable to see a way out. The thought of losing my education and the future I'd worked so hard for was crushing. I knew I couldn't keep going like this, but I also couldn't let Emma win. In that moment of desperation, I realized I needed to find a way to fight back, not just for myself, but for everyone who had suffered under Emma's tyranny. It was time to take action and expose Emma for who she really was. One afternoon, as I was restocking the shelves, I overheard Emma talking to one of her friends in the back room. They didn't notice me nearby. Emma was bragging about how she'd been collecting unemployment benefits while working full-time at the coffee shop. She laughed about how easy it was to fool the system and how the extra money was helping her live comfortably. My heart raced as I listened to her blatant admission of fraud. This was the break I needed. In that moment, everything became clear. Emma's arrogance and greed would be her downfall. I knew that welfare fraud was a serious crime, and if I could gather enough evidence, I could report her anonymously. The thought of bringing her to justice gave me a renewed sense of purpose. I decided to take the risk and collect as much proof as possible to expose her lies. I started my payback the very next day. Discreetly, I took photos of the work schedule that clearly showed Emma working full-time hours. I also made copies of the shift rosters, documenting her consistent presence at the coffee shop. My phone became my best tool as I recorded conversations whenever Emma boasted about her fraudulent activities. One evening, I stayed late after closing to go through the old schedules and pay stubs. I found more evidence of Emma's deception, confirming that she'd been lying for months. I felt a surge of adrenaline each time I gathered a new piece of proof. The risks were high. If Emma caught me, she would surely find a way to get rid of me. But my determination to see her pay for her actions kept me going. Despite the fear, I knew this was the right thing to do. I double-checked all my evidence and prepared my anonymous report. The weight of my decision was heavy, but I couldn't let Emma's abuse continue. With everything in place, I took a deep breath and submitted the tip to the welfare department, detailing all the information I had collected. Now, all I could do was wait and hope that justice would be served. The day I submitted the anonymous tip was filled with a mix of fear and hope. I meticulously compiled all the evidence I had gathered. Photos of my work schedules, copies of shift rosters, and the recordings of Emma bragging about her fraud. I typed up a detailed report, including every piece of information that could help the welfare department build a case against her. My hands trembled as I hit the send button, submitting the anonymous tip online. In the days that followed, I was constantly on edge. The fear of being discovered was always in the back of my mind, but so was the hope that justice would be finally served. Every time Emma walked past me or called my name, my heart would race, thinking she might somehow know what I'd done. But I kept reminding myself that I had taken the first step towards ending her reign of terror. A few weeks later, the welfare officials arrived at the coffee shop. They walked in during a busy morning shift, asking to speak with the manager. Emma, ever the picture of confidence, sauntered over to them with her usual arrogance. She smiled and tried to charm them, confident that she could talk her way out of whatever inquiry they had. However, as the officials began to present the evidence they had received, Emma's demeanor changed. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of panic as they showed her the photos, rosters, and recordings. She tried to deny everything, but the proof was overwhelming. The officials weren't swayed by her frantic explanations and instead asked to see more records and speak with employees. The reaction among the staff and customers was a mix of shock and satisfaction. My coworkers, who had also suffered under Emma's management, exchanged glances of relief. Some of the regular customers watched in stunned silence, whispering to each other about the unfolding drama. It was a surreal moment, seeing Emma's carefully constructed facade crumble under the weight of her own lies. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope that things would get better. Emma's downfall was swift and decisive. The welfare investigation found her guilty of fraud, leading to hefty fines and a criminal record. She was immediately fired from her position as manager, and the news of her deceit spread quickly throughout the town. Emma's reputation was irreparably damaged, making it nearly impossible for her to find new employment. The legal consequences of her actions ensured that she would never again be in a position of power over others. Seeing her face the repercussions of her cruelty and dishonesty brought a sense of justice and closure to everyone she had wronged. With Emma gone, the atmosphere at the coffee shop improved dramatically. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders and I could finally focus on my studies without constant stress. I continued working at the coffee shop, but now it was a much more positive environment. I managed to balance work and school, and eventually, I graduated with honors. The experience made me stronger and more determined to succeed. I moved on to a fulfilling career, leaving the toxic environment behind. The journey had been tough, but standing up for myself and others gave me the empowerment I needed to build a better future. So, you know what I love the most about this revenge story? It's not the fact that OP got revenge and kind of avenged all those people, but more so, it's so much more likely that Emma, after all of this happening to her, thinks that one of her friends she told about what she was doing had to have been the person who ratted her out. You will make her think that one of her friends is an utter backstabber, and she will likely never find out who. Our next story is, my malicious stepbrother tried to ruin my chance at getting into a prestigious college. My friends and I were talking about their different experiences, and I remembered how my stepbrother tried to sabotage me once, although we have grown so closer over the years. Still, I think it was an experience I wanted to share. My early years as a kid was quite an experience. Now that I think about it as an adult, I, 21-year-old male, seem to have forgotten most of these experiences, but the one which stuck to me the most was my mom and I moving from motels to motels after she finally decided she had had enough of my dad's drunken attitude. The happy memories I had of my dad were mostly him helping me out with my homework after school, and fixing of cars with him in his garage after we were done with my homework. There were days where we made steak and lamb chops together. There were days we would go for drives together, which was fun. And then there were the bad days when my mom came back home from work to meet my dad drunk on the sofa, days when they argued about how irresponsible he was, and days when my mom would lock herself up to cry silently without having any idea that I was eavesdropping. Out of the blue, my mom decided she had had enough and took our bags and left. We lived in a small town in Arizona, so it was mostly staying at different motels till we moved to Brooklyn. I had such great expectations of things falling into place when we got to the city that it came as a shock to me when I saw the apartment we were forced to live in because we were broke. I was young and foolish, so I blamed my mom for making me suffer and taking me away from my dad, and I hated my dad for not coming to find me. I could tell she was always hurt whenever I talked about missing my dad, but it didn't stop me. If anything, it urged me to be more rebellious. I really was a dumb kid. My mom worked 4 jobs and took me to a community school where I was able to appreciate my mom more. I saw people who treated their kids like trash, so that was a huge eye-opener for me. As time went by, I got to high school and decided to take a little load off my mom's hands by getting a job, which I did. I got hired at a restaurant. It wasn't too far from school. Most high school kids came there after school, so it was always packed and I was always busy. My first encounter with Jason was unexpected. I came to work finding the restaurant packed as usual and changed into my outfit. My boss instructed me on the next table to wait, and as I went there, I saw Jason and his friends seated. I asked for their orders and wrote it down. I knew these guys were trouble as soon as their orders arrived, and they began making a scene about how I got their order wrong and needing something different. I'd been working at the restaurant for a month now, and this was my first time handling such a case, and I didn't want to look like a pushover, so I stood my ground and showed them specifically what they had ordered for. What I wasn't expecting was an impacted fist on my face. This was where I lost it. I made sure I hit the person who had hit me back, the person being Jason. This led to a massive fight at the restaurant, and us going to the station. My mom came and apologized to Jason's dad, who was nice about the whole situation. They both exchanged numbers, and I was forced to also apologize to Jason for taking a wrong order, which I knew I didn't do, but just to avoid further escalation, I apologized to him. I was suspended from work for a week. My boss knew I wasn't at fault. He only suspended me because he expected me to come to him and explain the whole situation to him instead of taking matters into my hands. About a month later, everything was back to normal. I was doing my thing, going to school and from school to work and from work home, when I saw Jason's dad dropping off my mom, who was smiling broadly, and I knew something was going on. While I was happy to see my mom with someone, Jason's dad wasn't high on my list. I spoke to my mom about it and she said they were getting to know each other. I silently hoped and prayed they broke up or lost interest in each other, but things did not go that way. I wasn't against my mom dating. I wanted her to be happy, but if things went further down the line, I knew that meant Jason and I would be stepbrothers, and I didn't want that to happen. Things were moving fast with my mom and Jason's dad, Mr. Adams. Soon, my mom initiated a get-together so we could all have dinner as a family. This was the first time I ever entered one of the homes at Greenpoint. I knew Mr. Adams was rich, but I didn't understand his level of wealth till I entered his home. There was a chef who made us dinner and a housekeeper who cleaned it up. It immediately explained a lot about Jason's character, who apparently was unavailable for dinner. His dad and I talked briefly after my mom left the table. He apologized to me and explained how Jason's mom died when he was little and how neglectful he'd been of him since he solely focused on his job. I saw a different side of Mr. Adams, and my opinion of him changed after that night. I knew Jason being absent for dinner was his way of saying he was against the relationship between my mom and his dad. What I wasn't expecting was how far he was willing to take things. A week after dinner, Jason comes over to threaten me and my mom to stay away from his dad. Unfortunately for him, my mom had an early shift and left earlier. So he and his crew faced me, and this just made me more adamant to go against his wishes. So I told my mom nothing, and a few months later, my mom and Mr. Adams got married. This caused a lot of changes. First, we had to move to another street, which was quite the distance from where my mom and I formerly lived. Then I had to quit my job at the restaurant and also change school. By now, I was in senior school, contemplating my options when it came to colleges. I knew I shouldn't be too greedy with my choices, but I also knew I had Mr. Adams, who was wealthy enough to pay for any college of my choice. Besides, I had a lot of free time since I quit working at the restaurant, so I took it upon myself to apply to the most prestigious colleges. First was Stanford and the second was Yale. I was 19 at the time and had done 0 extracurricular activities since I was always at work. So I knew my chances were slim, but that didn't stop me, and my counselor kept encouraging to try it out since my SAT score was good. I had given up on the idea of getting into either of those colleges when I received a letter from Stanford asking me to come for an interview. I was over the moon. My stepdad was so excited when I shared the news over dinner, though I couldn't say the same about Jason. Speaking of Jason, living with him was more peaceful than I expected. He was hardly ever around. None of our mates knew anything about our parents, and we didn't act like we knew each other both home and in school or anywhere, so it was easy. Most of our classmates found out we were stepbrothers during our graduation, and it was mind-blowing to most of them because we sure didn't act like it. I could tell Jason wasn't thrilled about the whole college situation. Maybe it had to do with the fact that his dad insisted on tagging along with me for the interview, or the proud look on Mr. Adams' face when I told him of the news, but either way, it was clear Jason wasn't happy. I went for the interview, and everything was fine. I'd begun preparing towards college when I received a call from the school telling me they were sorry to hear I rejected an opportunity of a lifetime. I was stunned. I wasn't aware I had rejected this offer, and why would I? I knew immediately who was behind this, and I wouldn't lie, I was mad. So mad I confronted him, and all he had to say was he knew nothing about it. He denied it even after being confronted by his dad. Everyone knew he was lying, but there was nothing we could do about it. I was so close to making it into my dream college, but he suddenly snatched that from me. I was still trying to get over this when my biological father suddenly showed up to the city to confront my mom about being a cheater. He basically accused her of getting married while being married to him, which wasn't a lie. My mom and dad never properly divorced. She left thinking he signed the divorce papers she left on the table and didn't bother finalizing their divorce. She also never had a court marriage with Jason's dad, which was a mistake on her part. Now it was being used against her. My dad made a huge scene about this and sued her for being disloyal in their marriage. By now, I was old enough to know my dad didn't care about my mom's dishonesty or mistake. He saw an opportunity to make money and was trying to use it to his advantage. He never asked about me, nor acknowledged my presence, and I realized I had been the fool pining over someone who clearly didn't give a freak about me. My stepdad and my mom spent months on the case. My mom wasn't ready nor willing to give my dad a dime despite my dad's reservation. She wasn't going to waver. She was willing to drag it out with him in court no matter how much it cost. Eventually, the court ruled in my dad's favor, and she had to pay him a fine, which my mom did reluctantly, and finally divorced my dad. We all knew without any doubt that Jason was responsible for my dad coming to town. He wanted to stir up trouble, and he did, but this time, his dad didn't take things easy with him. Jason was given 2 options by his dad. He either takes therapy and counseling, or he gets disowned by his dad. Jason thought this was a joke, and so did I. I knew Mr. Adams as the kind, soft-hearted person who always wanted the best for those he loved, but to disown his own son was going too far. I didn't see him doing that, as I'm sure Jason didn't expect him to be serious, so it was shocking to see Mr. Adams slam the files on his desk and asking his son to weigh his options. I was scared Jason would make a huge mistake out of pride, but he didn't. Mr. Adams made an appointment for him, and he began therapy the next day. This turned out to be what Jason needed. He spoke to his dad about how neglected he felt and the way he wished they could spend more time together, which Mr. Adams had no problem with. I was able to clarify the whole issue about rejecting their offer in college, and after a lot of interference from Mr. Adams, I was finally able to make it into my dream school. Well, I guess it didn't come without a lot of stress and money spent, but at least everything seemed to work out well, and hey, maybe OP will actually get a stepbrother out of this, because he sure heck wasn't a stepbrother up until this point. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.